Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I've been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for On SI every single day since August 2019, and we are continuing to move forward through yet another offseason together. As always, you can always find our 100% free 24/7 boots on the ground coverage of the Jacksonville Jaguars when you follow us on social media such as Facebook and Twitter at Jaguars on SI. You can also find us at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. Hello folks and welcome to today's episode. I don't really think I need to give too much of an intro into what we're going to be talking about. It's very clearly the talking point of Jacksonville Jaguars and their social media, fan base, etc. during Wednesday. Obviously, the NFL ESPN list has completely, put out several times where the Jaguars have been, stars snubbed one way or another. Of course, these top 10s from ESPN, we talk about them every single year. They're, put together with insight from anonymous NFL executives, coaches, scouts, etc. We knew the Jaguars weren't going to be on most of these lists. When you go in 4-13, and when you ultimately don't have that many players who are personally and just individually productive like the Jaguars had last year, you're not going to have a lot of guys on these lists. You saw some guys fall out of some top 10s, some guys who, because of injuries or for whatever reason, their production took a step back last year. But we have seen, I think, two egregious snubs. One is Josh Hines-Allen. Obviously, we've talked about him. The next one, though, is the one I don't really get. You can make the argument to me that Josh Hines-Allen, his production fell off, and I'm just talking about sacks, etc. So that's why he wasn't rated higher in this poll. I would understand that, even if I disagree with it. But if there was one Jaguar who was productive last year, and who there should be no argument against them for making the top 10, they had everything you could want. They were individually the best player on the team last year and one of the best players at their entire position. And that is wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. And I fully expected, I've said in some of the other times that we've talked about this list over the last couple of weeks that, I don't expect the Jaguars to be represented very much, but I do expect Brian Thomas Jr. to be in the top 10. When I opened it and read it this morning, I was genuinely a bit shocked by it. So just going through the top 10, they had Jamar Chase at 1, Justin Jefferson at 2, Tyreek Hill at 3, CeeDee Lamb at 4, A.J. Brown at 5, Amon-Ra St. Brown at 6, Malik Nabers at 7, Nico Collins at 8, Mike Evans at number 9, and Garrett Wilson at number 10. Brian Thomas Jr. was among the honorable mentions, along with Puka Nacua, Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, T. Higgins, and Devontae Adams. Some other guys who received votes are Devonta Smith, Ladd McConkey, Jackson Smith Njigba, Jameson Williams, DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, George Pickens, Calvin Ridley, Jalen Waddle, and Cortland Sutton. There are several names above Thomas in this list that just to me are egregious. And Jeremy Fowler, of course, is just a messenger. This isn't a top 10 list that he made his own opinions, etc. But he pointed out there were 5 guys basically tied for the last 2 spots: Evans, Wilson, McLaurin, Nacua, and Thomas. Ends up going to Wilson for the final spot. He's, had 3 1,000-yard seasons, etc. He just got paid, but I think if a team has to pick who do they least want to play in a must-win game for their defense the next week, I think most would pick Brian Thomas Jr. over Garrett Wilson. To me, Puka Nacua should also be in the top 10. I get Mike Evans being in there. Nico Collins, I also get being in there. Malik Nabers, I just don't understand how Malik Nabers falls into the top 10, especially at number 7. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he has the production, and it will seem like it's a bit silly to kind of hand-wring over him because, like I said, his numbers are obviously there. He's been a great player. But in terms of high-level traits, I'd put Puka Nacua over him, for example. He's obviously a very good player, but I do think he's benefited some from the scheme, etc. A.J. Brown, where he should be. CeeDee Lamb, where he should be. Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, obviously the two best at their position. Tyreek Hill only fell one spot in the ranking from the year before. The lowest he was rated was number 8. I think if we're just looking at what he did last season and how he played last year, I'm not sure you can say top 10. And those are just the guys to me that right off the bat, I think Brian Thomas Jr. should be over. Malik Neighbors, for example, making the list. So many of the people point to Malik Neighbors' quarterback play, etc. Brian Thomas played with the best quarterback between them and the Giants by far, and Trevor Lawrence. But for about half the season. The other half of the season, they were nearly equal in attempts, was from Mac Jones. Mac Jones compared to Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is probably several tiers above Mac Jones. Look at the contracts they signed. Mac Jones signed like a 2-year, $8.6 million. Daniel Jones signed a 1-year, $14 million contract. Daniel Jones might start for a team this year. Mac Jones isn't. So if you want to talk about the quarterbacks that they played with, Brian Thomas Jr. played with a quarterback worse than Malik Neighbors played with. I think Malik Neighbors, and he said he had his highest ranking as somebody put him 4th. It's a little bonkers to me. He got a higher volume than Brian Thomas Jr. in from a better quarterback than Brian Thomas Jr. had half the time. But Brian Thomas Jr. across the board had a better season. 2 good receivers, obviously. 2 great receivers. But I think the fact that people are still evaluating them as the prospects who came out of LSU, as opposed to what we've seen in the NFL so far. People are looking at it as they had Malik Neighbors 1 and Brian Thomas Jr. 2 coming out of LSU. And that to me is what they were ranked upon in this poll. Because so many people had Malik Neighbors first, and because Malik Neighbors was the early first round pick, obviously gets some of the draft pedigree, inflation here. And I think Brian Thomas Jr., until he stacks several seasons better than Malik Neighbors, like he did last season, until he does that, he's probably unjustifiably going to have to face, some of that when he gets compared to Malik Neighbors. The fact that Malik Neighbors went before him in the draft, and so many evaluators still hold on to their college evaluations and have Malik Neighbors still as the best receiver coming off that LSU team. And that's not meant as a slight to Malik Neighbors. He had a really impressive rookie season. But Brian Thomas Jr., to me, both in terms of film, in terms of production, efficiency, whatever you want to call it, Brian Thomas Jr. to me had a better season than Malik Neighbors. I'm not sure what else Brian Thomas Jr. could have done to be listed in this top 10. And I get the wide receiver position is deep. There are 5 guys right off the bat who I don't think you can make a single argument against them not being on the list. So that creates, obviously, an area where there aren't many guys who can fall in after them. And if it was a situation where I don't think you can make a justification for Thomas over the guys in front of him, I think you would just have to concede that the wide receiver position is too stacked, etc. But when you're putting guys above him, like in my opinion Tyreek Hill, like in my opinion Malik Neighbors, who are not projecting better than Brian Thomas Jr., who do not have a better season than Brian Thomas Jr., it becomes a lot tougher for me to wrap my head around it. I think, just like the person said, when you read the article, Jeremy Fowler says the personnel executive told him Brian Thomas Jr. will be in this list next year. I think you can certainly assume that. But as long as you're playing for a losing Jaguars team, I just think it is clear these players are going to get hit by Jaguar stacks. Because if Brian Thomas Jr. is being impacted by it, after the stellar record-breaking rookie season that he had, and then Josh Allen is getting snubbed due to it, I'm not sure who would be impervious to that. So we will certainly see moving forward, but Brian Thomas Jr. is the latest snub, and we will see how that changes moving forward. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode. Please go find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all other podcast platforms at the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. And then please find us on YouTube at Sports Videos on SI.